What happens when a sneer at 35,000 feet becomes the most expensive mistake of your life? On Wing Airlines. Flight 712, from London to New York, a senior flight attendant named Candice Miller saw a black woman in first class and made a judgment. She heard an accent and decided it was an invitation for mockery. But Candice had no idea who she was speaking to. She didn't know the woman, Dr. Imani Hayes, wasn't just another passenger. She was the silent, unseen force who had just acquired a controlling stake in the entire airline. This isn't just a story about bad customer service. It's the story of how a single act of prejudice triggered a corporate earthquake, proving that karma doesn't just knock on your door. Sometimes it owns the plane you're flying. The soft ambient glow of the first-class cabin on Wing Airlines Flight 712 was designed to soothe. For Dr. Imani Hayes, it was a familiar environment, a transient office in the sky where she could decompress between continents. Dressed in an impeccably tailored but understated charcoal grey pantsuit, she settled into seat 2A, the rich leather sighing under her weight. Her hair was styled in elegant, intricate braids that cascaded over her shoulder, and the only jewelry she wore was a simple classic watch and a single ring. She was engrossed in a thick binder filled with aeronautical engineering schematics and market projections, her brow furrowed in concentration. The flight was just reaching cruising altitude over the vast, dark expanse of the Atlantic. The gentle chime signaling that passengers could move about the cabin had just sounded when the lead flight attendant for the first-class section made her first appearance. Her name was Candice Miller. She was a woman in her late 40s with sharp, angular features, blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun, and a smile that never quite reached her pale blue eyes. Candice had been with Wing for over 2 decades. She carried herself with an air of unshakable authority, viewing the first-class cabin not as a service area, but as her personal domain. She had a practiced eye for sizing up passengers, sorting them into categories of old money, new money, celebrity, and her least favorite upgrades, or points travelers whom she treated with a thinly veiled disdain. When her eyes landed on Imani Candice's internal calculus began. The woman was black, which was still a relative rarity in the front cabin of these transatlantic flights. The suit was expensive, yes, but not flashy. The watch was elegant, not diamond-encrusted. But it was when Imani looked up to ask a question that Candice's prejudice locked into place. "Excuse me," Imani began, her voice a warm, melodious alto. "Could I possibly trouble you for a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lime, please?" Imani's accent was a beautiful transatlantic blend. The crisp, precise enunciation of someone educated at the highest levels in America and Britain was layered over a gentle, lyrical cadence that hinted at her Nigerian heritage. She had spent a lifetime navigating different worlds, and her speech was a map of that journey. Candice's professional smile flickered, replaced by a microscopic, almost imperceptible sneer. She tilted her head, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. "Of course," she replied, drawing out the vowel. "Sparkling water. I think we can manage that for you." She repeated the words slowly, as if speaking to a child or someone who didn't understand English. Imani felt a familiar cold prickle on her skin. It was the type of microaggression she had faced her entire life. It was subtle enough that, to an observer, it might seem like nothing. But to the target, it was a clear, sharp jab intended to diminish, to put her in her place. She met Candice's gaze, her expression unreadable, and simply said, "Thank you." Candice turned on her heel and walked to the galley. A younger flight attendant, a bright-eyed woman named Chloe, was preparing the drink service. "Get me some sparkling water," Candace said, mimicking Imani's accent with cruel exaggeration to Chloe. "And she wants a lime. Can you believe it?" Chloe looked uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" "Seat 2A," Candace whispered, conspiratorially leaning in. "Probably won the lottery or got a payout from some lawsuit. You can always tell. They get a taste of the good life and think they own the place. She's probably never flown first class before in her life." Chloe glanced nervously towards the cabin. "She seems perfectly polite to me." "Oh, they always are at first," Candace scoffed, grabbing the water. "Just you watch. The entitlement will come out. Mark my words." When Candace returned with the drink, she placed it on Imani's tray, with a little too much force, causing some of the water to slosh over the rim. "There you are," she said, her voice bright and false. "Enjoy." Imani simply picked up a napkin, dabbed the small spill without a word, and returned to her documents. She did not complain. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand to see a supervisor. Instead, a quiet, steely resolve settled deep within her. She had not become one of the most successful and now powerful women in her field by reacting emotionally to predictable bigotry. She had done it by observing, strategizing, and acting with overwhelming and decisive force when the time was right. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her water. Candace Miller had no idea that her every move, every sneer, every whispered comment in the galley was being logged in a mental ledger. And Dr. Imani Hayes had just decided that the debt on that ledger was about to be called due. The new owner of Aura Wing Airlines was taking notes, and the first order of business upon landing was going to be a radical top-down cultural restructuring, and it was going to start with the senior flight attendant in first class. To understand the quiet storm brewing inside Dr. Imani Hayes, one had to understand the journey that forged her. She wasn't born into a world of leather seats and champagne service. She was the architect of her own empire, and its foundations were built with grit, genius, and an unwavering refusal to be defined by the narrow minds of others. Imani was the only child of Dr. Adebayo and Funke Hayes' Nigerian immigrants, who had arrived in Houston, Texas in the late 1970s with 2 suitcases, a pair of brilliant minds, and a dream that burned brighter than the Texas sun. Her father was a professor of chemical engineering at Rice University, her mother a respected pediatrician. They were a family of academics, and their home was a sanctuary of books, lively debate, and relentless encouragement. From a young age, they instilled in Imani 2 core principles: that her mind was her most powerful asset, and that her heritage was a source of strength, not shame. Her father would often tell her, holding her small hands in his, "Imani, your accent is the music of your history. It tells the story of your grandparents in Lagos and your own journey here. Never let anyone make you feel small for the beautiful way your story sounds." She excelled in school, demonstrating a prodigious aptitude for mathematics and physics. While other kids were playing games, Imani was building complex model rockets and teaching herself computer programming. She devoured books on celestial mechanics and aerodynamics. Her path was clear. She attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, on a full scholarship, earning her bachelor's and then her PhD in aerospace engineering, with a specialization in propulsion systems. Her doctoral thesis, a groundbreaking paper on ion thruster efficiency, is still cited as a foundational text in the field. But academia wasn't enough. Imani saw the vast gulf between brilliant theoretical concepts and their real-world application. She knew that to truly make an impact, she needed to understand the machinery of business. So she did what few with her technical background would. She enrolled at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. It was at Stanford that she faced a new, more insidious kind of prejudice. In the world of engineering, her brilliance was quantifiable, her equations either right or wrong. In the world of venture capital and corporate strategy, she was often the only black woman in the room. Her ideas were dismissed, her ambition was seen as aggression, and her accent was once again a target. During one pitch meeting for a startup idea, a venture capitalist had cut her off mid-sentence and said, "Honey, could you repeat that I'm having a little trouble with your cadence?" Instead of breaking her, these experiences hardened her resolve into something akin to diamond. She learned to be twice as prepared, 3 times as articulate, and 10 times as resilient as her peers. She graduated top of her class, and rather than taking a comfortable job at a major corporation, she did the unthinkable. With a small seed fund scraped together from her parents' savings and a few believers, she founded her own company in a dusty Palo Alto garage, Vector Thrust Dynamics. Vector Thrust was built on a revolutionary idea, a proprietary software algorithm that could optimize fuel consumption for commercial airlines by calculating flight paths in real time, factoring in thousands of variables from atmospheric pressure to jet stream fluctuations. The industry was skeptical. The major players like Boeing and Airbus had their own systems. But Imani was relentless. She secured a pilot program with a small, struggling cargo airline. Within 6 months, her software had saved them 18% on their fuel costs, a figure so staggering it was almost unbelievable. Word spread like wildfire. Soon, major carriers were knocking on her door. Within a decade, Vector Thrust Dynamics was the undisputed global leader in aviation logistics software. Its technology was in the navigation systems of nearly 70% of the world's commercial aircraft. The success made Imani extraordinarily wealthy. When a major tech conglomerate acquired Vector Thrust for a sum in the low 10 figures, Imani found herself a billionaire before the age of 40. She could have retired, sailed the world, or dedicated her life to philanthropy. But she wasn't finished. She had spent her life observing the airline industry from the outside. She saw its inefficiencies, its resistance to change, and most personally, its frequent cultural failings. She saw how employees were often overworked and undervalued, a bitterness that sometimes trickled down to the customer. She saw how airlines like Aurawing, once a proud symbol of luxury travel, were now floundering, saddled with an aging fleet, a tarnished reputation for customer service, and mounting debt. While others saw a failing company, Imani saw an opportunity. Aurawing had good bones, valuable landing slots at major hubs, a well-known brand, and a loyal, if dwindling, customer base. What it lacked was vision, innovation, and a soul. Working through a discreet, high-powered acquisition firm, Imani began quietly buying up Aurawing's stock. Then she targeted its debt, buying it from creditors at a discount. Within 18 months, through a series of brilliant and complex financial maneuvers, she had become the silent majority shareholder. She controlled the company. The final papers had been signed just last week in her London office. This Flight 712 was her first time flying her own airline as its owner. She hadn't announced her identity to the board yet. That was scheduled for an emergency meeting the day after she landed in New York. She wanted to experience the airline as a regular passenger to see the unvarnished reality of the company she had just bought. She wanted to see its strengths, and more importantly, its weaknesses. And in the form of Candice Miller, a glaring weakness had just presented itself. As Imani sat in seat 2A, she wasn't just a passenger feeling the sting of disrespect. She was the owner conducting a final impromptu audit, and someone had just failed in the most spectacular way imaginable. The transatlantic journey stretched on a 7-hour play staged within a pressurized metal tube. And for Dr. Imani Hayes, it became a masterclass in observation, as Candice Miller's performance as the queen of the first-class cabin continued each act more revealing than the last. Having established her perceived dominance over the passenger in 2A, Candace grew bolder. Her disdain was no longer confined to hushed whispers in the galley. It began to manifest in her service, a series of calculated slights designed to assert her authority. During the meal service, she took the orders of every other passenger, first pointedly skipping over Imani until the very end. When she finally arrived at her seat, her notepad was already closed. "And for you?" she asked, her tone suggesting Imani was an afterthought. "I'll have the seared salmon, please," Imani replied calmly, not rising to the bait. Candace made a small tsk sound. "I'll have to see if we have any left. It's been very popular." It was a lie, and they both knew it. First class was always provisioned with enough options for every passenger. A man across the aisle, a distinguished-looking gentleman in his late 60s, named Arthur Penhaligon, noticed the exchange. He was a retired investment banker, a frequent flyer who knew the rhythms of these flights intimately. He recognized the passive-aggressive power play for what it was, and gave Imani a sympathetic glance. Imani offered a small, almost imperceptible nod in return, acknowledging his silent support. Of course the salmon was available. When Candace served it, she didn't place the plate down gently. She set it down with a click that was just loud enough to be jarring. Later, when clearing the tray, she accidentally jostled Imani's arm, nearly upsetting the cup of coffee beside it. "Oh, do be careful," Candace said, implying the fault was Imani's. Imani simply set her cup straight and said, "Thank you for the reminder." Her composure was a fortress, and Candace's petty assaults were bouncing harmlessly off its walls. This infuriated the flight attendant even more. She was used to eliciting a reaction, a flustered complaint, a flash of anger, which would, in her twisted view, validate her initial judgment. But Imani's serene, watchful calm was unnerving. It felt like being studied under a microscope. The drama escalated about an hour before landing. Imani, needing to work on a sensitive document on her laptop, tried to plug it into the seat's power outlet. It wasn't working. She politely pressed the call button. Chloe, the younger attendant, arrived first. "Is everything all right, Mum?" "Yes, thank you. I just can't seem to get any power from this outlet," Imani explained. Chloe knelt to inspect it, her demeanor helpful and professional. "Sometimes they can be a bit tricky. Let me just reset it from our panel." Before she could, Candace swept in, pushing past her junior colleague. "What seems to be the problem now?" she asked, her voice tight with annoyance. "The power outlet isn't working," Imani stated again, her tone even. Candace glanced at the plug with theatrical exasperation. "You have to push the plug in all the way." "Some people don't realize that," she said, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. She gave the plug a hard shove. Nothing happened. "It seems to be faulty," Imani said. Candace let out an audible, long-suffering sigh. "Well, I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about that mid-flight. Our engineering team can look at it on the ground. You'll just have to manage without it." She made no offer to see if another seat was available, no apology for the inconvenience of a paid-for amenity not working in the most expensive section of the plane. She turned to leave her job in her mind done. It was at this moment that Arthur Penhaligon, the man in seat 3C, decided he had seen enough. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the easy authority of a man used to being heard. "That's not an acceptable response." Candace froze, turning slowly to face him. He was clearly old money, the type of passenger she was trained to placate. "I beg your pardon, sir." "The outlet is broken," Arthur said plainly. "This lady has paid a premium for a service that includes a working power source. Your job is not to sigh and walk away, but to find a solution." Is there another open seat in the cabin she can move to for the remainder of the flight to charge her device? It's a simple question. Candace was momentarily flustered, caught between her contempt for Imani and her deference to a passenger like Arthur. I would have to check the manifest, sir. Then please do so, Arthur said, his tone leaving no room for argument. With a look of pure venom directed at Imani, a look that said, "You've brought this on yourself by enlisting others." Candace stormed off to the galley. She returned moments later, her face a mask of bitter defeat. The passenger in 4A has disembarked early, using his own private jet connection from our stopover in Shannon. That seat is available. The outlet is functional. The words sounded like they were being dragged from her throat. "Wonderful," Arthur said, then looked at Imani. "There you have it." "Thank you for your assistance," Imani said to Arthur, her gratitude genuine. She then looked at Candace, her expression still unreadably calm. "And thank you for finding a solution." She gathered her belongings and moved to the new seat. As she settled in, she could hear Candace muttering to Chloe just inside the galley. "Can you believe the nerve getting other passengers to fight her battles? So typical." Imani plugged in her laptop. The small charging light blinked on. She opened the secure file she needed to review. It was the final draft of the press release prepared by her communications team. The headline was stark and simple: Aura Wing Airlines, acquired by tech billionaire Dr. Imani Hayes. Immediate leadership overhaul announced. She read the words, a grim sense of irony washing over her. The document detailed her vision for a new era at the airline, an era focused on technological innovation, efficiency, and above all, a renewed commitment to unparalleled customer service and employee respect. She glanced over at Candace, who was now forcing a smile as she offered a hot towel to Mr. Penhaligon. This flight had been a perfect, if painful, diagnostic test. It had shown her the precise location of the disease within her new company. And as the plane began its final descent into New York, Dr. Hayes knew that the cure was going to be swift, and it was going to be surgical. The wheels of the Airbus A350 kissed the tarmac at John F. Kennedy International Airport with a gentle screech. For most passengers, it signaled the end of a journey. For Candace Miller, it was the end of an era, though she didn't know it yet. For Dr. Imani Hayes, it was the beginning. As the plane taxied towards the gate, Candace was already back in command mode, her voice sharp and authoritative over the cabin intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate, and the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign." She bustled through the first-class cabin, collecting last-minute service items, her demeanor radiating smug satisfaction. She had put the difficult passenger in 2A, now 4A, in her place, and the flight was over. In her mind, she had won. She shot one last dismissive glance at Imani, who was calmly packing her binder and laptop into her leather briefcase. When the seatbelt sign finally pinged off, Candace positioned herself at the aircraft door, ready to bestow her farewells. "Goodbye, Mr. Penhaligon. Always a pleasure," she chirped as Arthur passed. Arthur paused for a moment. "Your service on this flight." "Candace was some of the most unprofessional I have ever witnessed," he said in a low, firm voice, ensuring only she could hear. "You should be ashamed." He didn't wait for a reply, simply shaking his head and stepping onto the jet bridge. Candace's face flushed a blotchy red. Humiliated and furious, her eyes darted to Imani, who was next in line to disembark. She braced herself for another confrontation. But Imani simply walked towards the door, met Candace's glare with that same unnerving calm and said, "Please remain on the aircraft. The ground supervisor and the chief of in-flight operations need to speak with you." The request was so unexpected, so filled with quiet authority that Candace was momentarily stunned into silence. Who are you to tell me? I'm the person who signs the checks, Imani said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the weight of an anvil. Now please wait here. Before Candace could process this, Imani stepped onto the jet bridge. Waiting there, their faces a mixture of anxiety and confusion, were three figures in sharp suits. One was the JFK Airport Station manager. Another was Aura Wing's Senior Vice President of In-Flight Operations, a man named Michael Corrigan. And standing between them, looking pale and deeply troubled, was Robert Maxwell, the CEO of Aura Wing Airlines. Mr. Maxwell, Imani said, her tone crisp and all business. Thank you for meeting me. Robert Maxwell, a man who commanded boardrooms with an iron fist, practically flinched. He had received a cryptic, urgent message from the acquisition firm an hour ago. The new owner, Dr. Hayes, is on Flight 7112. She is not pleased. Meet her at the gate. Do not fail. He had been sweating ever since. He had pictured a formidable corporate titan, a ruthless Wall Street raider. He was not prepared for this poised, impeccably dressed black woman whose calm demeanor seemed more intimidating than any shouting CEO he had ever faced. Dr. Hayes, he stammered, extending a clammy hand. Welcome. I am so sorry for whatever has transpired. I had no idea you were on board. That was the point, Robert, Imani said, ignoring his hand. I wanted to see the airline I'd just bought through the eyes of a customer, and what I saw was rotten. Her gaze flickered back towards the aircraft door where Candace was now peering out her face, a mask of dawning horror, as she saw her ultimate boss and her boss's boss standing at attention for the very woman she had tormented for 7 hours. The color drained from her face. Her world was tilting on its axis. Michael, Imani said, turning to the SVP of In-Flight Operations. Your senior attendant on this flight, Candace Miller. Her behavior was not just unprofessional. It was a liability. It was laced with a thinly veiled bigotry that has no place in this company. Certainly not in the one I intend to run. Michael Corrigan looked like he wanted the jet bridge to swallow him whole. Dr. Hayes, I assure you this is an isolated incident. Don't. Imani cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp as glass. Do not insult my intelligence by telling me this is an isolated incident. This level of arrogance and prejudice doesn't just appear overnight. It's a symptom of a deep cultural sickness, one that you, as head of this department, have allowed to fester. She then turned her attention back to the CEO. Robert, my first official directive as the new owner of Aura Wing Airlines is this: Ms. Miller's employment is to be terminated immediately. Her security credentials are to be revoked before she leaves this airport. She is not to work another flight. Am I clear? Yes, Dr. Hayes, absolutely. Maxwell squeaked, nodding vigorously. Imani took a step closer, lowering her voice so only the executives could hear. But that's just the start. This is not about one employee. This is about the culture that enabled her. For 20 years, her behavior was likely tolerated, perhaps even rewarded, because she bullied and belittled the right people. Today she chose the wrong person. She looked past them, making eye contact with the ghost-white Candace, who was now trembling in the doorway. I am not just the new owner. I am your new standard. The culture of disrespect, of looking down on paying customers for any reason. Their accent, their race, their attire ends today. Consider this moment a ground zero for the new Aura Wing Airlines. Imani then stepped aside. Deal with your staff, member, she commanded. I have a board to meet. As Michael Corrigan and the station manager walked grimly toward the aircraft door to deliver the news, Imani looked at the shaken CEO. Our meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. has a new agenda item, Robert. It's titled, Building an Airline Worthy of Its Customers. I suggest you come prepared." Without another word, she turned and walked down the jet bridge, her heels clicking with the steady rhythmic sound of a new empire taking control. Behind her, a 20-year career built on a foundation of sneers and prejudice was crumbling into dust. The immediate aftermath in the sterile confines of the jet bridge was a scene of quiet, brutal efficiency. As Imani disappeared into the terminal, Michael Corrigan and the JFK station manager faced a stunned Candice Miller. Her 2 decades of seniority, her carefully cultivated aura of untouchable authority, evaporated under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Candice." Michael began, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You need to come with us. Please collect your personal belongings from the crew locker." "Michael, what is this?" "It was just a misunderstanding with a passenger," she pleaded, her voice cracking. The reality of the situation was crashing down on her with the force of a tidal wave. She was being difficult, and "Save it, Candice." The station manager cut in, his tone icy. "You harassed the new owner of the entire company for the duration of a 7-hour flight. Misunderstanding doesn't even begin to cover it. Your airport ID and crew credentials, please." Candice's hands trembled as she unclipped the ID from her uniform. Handing it over felt like severing a limb. This piece of plastic had been her identity, her key to a world she loved and lorded over. Now it was just a worthless piece of laminated card. She was escorted through a series of sterile back-of-house corridors she had walked 1,000 times. But this time, she wasn't a proud senior crew member. She was a pariah being marched to her execution. In a soulless, windowless office, her termination papers were waiting. The reason for dismissal was listed as gross misconduct and violation of company code of conduct. It was swift, clinical, and absolute. There was no appeal, no union to save her. Meanwhile, Dr. Imani Hayes was not reveling in the moment. Her mind was already on the next 10 moves. As she was whisked away in a black car, she made a call. "Arthur, it's Imani Hayes from the flight," she said, when Mr. Penhaligon picked up. "Dr. Hayes, my goodness, I saw the commotion. I trust everything was handled." He replied, a note of concern in his voice. "It was, but I'm calling to ask for a favor. My team may reach out to you. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement about what you witnessed on the flight today?" she asked. "It would be my absolute honor," Arthur said without hesitation. "What that woman did was inexcusable. You have my full support." "Thank you, Arthur. Your integrity is appreciated," she said before hanging up. She knew Candice might try to fight the termination, to paint herself as the victim. Arthur's testimony as a respected, impartial third-party witness would be invaluable in cementing the justification for her dismissal. It was a strategic move, ensuring every loose end was tied. The next morning, at the Aura Wing corporate headquarters on Park Avenue, the boardroom was electric with tension. The entire executive team was assembled. Robert Maxwell, who hadn't slept, started the meeting with a profuse, rambling apology. Imani held up a hand, cutting him off. "Robert, I appreciate the sentiment, but apologies are insufficient. I don't need apologies. I need a paradigm shift. What I experienced yesterday was a symptom of a disease. Today we begin the cure." For the next 2 hours, Imani laid out her vision. She spoke with the precision of an engineer and the passion of a revolutionary. She didn't shout. Her voice remained measured, but her words carried an undeniable weight. "Effective immediately," she announced, "we are completely overhauling our customer service and inclusivity training. It will no longer be a 2-hour video you watch once a year. It will be a rigorous, ongoing program developed by leading sociologists and HR specialists. It will be called the Hayes Initiative, and every single employee from the baggage handlers to the CEO will participate. She continued outlining a series of sweeping changes, a new confidential reporting system for both employees and customers to flag discriminatory behavior without fear of reprisal. A dignity in service bonus, where employees who received consistent verifiable commendations for exceptional and respectful service would receive significant financial rewards. A partnership with historically black colleges and universities to create a pipeline for pilots, engineers, and corporate executives, diversifying the overwhelmingly white male upper echelons of the company. Our brand is not just about getting from point A to point B, she declared, her eyes scanning the faces of the stunned executives. From this day forward, the Aura Wing brand stands for one thing above all else: absolute, unwavering respect. For everyone. If you cannot subscribe to that vision, your future is not with this company. The executives who had been bracing for a simple firing spree were blindsided. This wasn't just a new boss, it was a new philosophy. She wasn't just cleaning house, she was rebuilding it from the foundation, up on a bedrock of new principles. After the main meeting, she held a private one with Robert Maxwell. "Robert," she said, her tone softening slightly. "What I saw in Candace Miller was a sense of entitlement born from years of unchecked power. She felt safe to be cruel. My question for you is, how many more Candaces are there in this company? And what are you going to do about them?" I will launch a full-scale review, Dr. Hayes," he said, his voice earnest. "Good," Imani nodded. "Your job is to find the rot and cut it out. My job is to give you the tools and resources to rebuild something better in its place. Don't make me regret giving you that chance." As she left the boardroom, leaving a trail of terrified and galvanized executives in her wake, Imani knew the dismissal of one flight attendant was merely a symbol. It was a necessary, loud and clear message. But the real work, the hard work of transforming an entire corporate culture, had just begun. The foundation was laid. Now she had to build on it. For Candace Miller, the termination was just the beginning of a freefall. She had spent 20 years wrapped in the secure identity of a senior flight attendant for a major airline. It wasn't just a job, it was her entire social standing, her purpose. Stripped of her uniform and her wings, she found herself in a terrifying new reality. Her first reaction was indignant rage. She immediately contacted a lawyer, convinced she had a slam-dunk case for wrongful termination. "They fired me based on the complaint of one passenger," she fumed during their consultation. "It's my word against hers." Her lawyer, a sharp-suited man named David Chen, listened patiently. "Okay, Candace, let's start there. Who was the passenger?" "Some woman on a power trip. I don't even know her name." Candace lied, omitting the crucial detail she had since learned. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. When Chen filed the initial complaint, Aura Wing's legal department responded with overwhelming force. Their reply included a sworn notarized affidavit from Arthur Penhaligon, a highly respected figure in the financial world, detailing every microaggression and act of unprofessionalism he witnessed. It included a statement from Chloe, the junior flight attendant, who, under the protection of the newly announced whistleblower policy, recounted the mocking conversation in the galley. It even included records of 2 prior informal complaints against Candace for her abrasive attitude, complaints that had been buried by a previous supervisor who was a friend of hers. And then there was the final devastating blow. The passenger was Dr. Imani Hayes, the new majority owner. David Chen called Candace into his office, his face grim. "Candace, we have to drop this case. Not only do you not have a leg to stand on, But if this goes public, the media will crucify you. You mocked the new billionaire owner of the company you worked for. You will become a meme, a cautionary tale. Your name will be a joke." Defeated and humiliated, Candace withdrew the lawsuit, but the damage was already done. The aviation industry is a surprisingly small, interconnected world. While there was no official blacklist, the story of the flight attendant who was fired on the spot for insulting her new boss spread like wildfire through crew lounges, pilot forums, and HR departments. She applied for positions at other major airlines. Her resume was impressive, her experience extensive. She would get an initial interview, but the moment the hiring manager connected Candace Miller with Aura-Wing, a chill would enter the room. The interviews would end abruptly. No one wanted to hire a walking liability, a symbol of the exact kind of PR nightmare every airline spends millions to avoid. After months of rejections, her savings began to dwindle. The mortgage on her upscale condo felt like a millstone around her neck. She was forced to take a job serving food at a TGI Fridays in a suburban mall, the indignity of it a constant burning shame. She who had served champagne and caviar in the skies was now refilling sodas and asking people if they wanted extra jalapeno poppers. Her former colleagues, whom she occasionally ran into, would offer pitying looks or avoid her altogether. Her bitterness festered. Refusing to accept any responsibility, she decided to tell her side of the story. She created a GoFundMe page and wrote a long, rambling post painting herself as the victim of a power-hungry corporate tyrant and cancel culture. She claimed she was fired for simply doing her job. The post went viral, but not in the way she had hoped. Instead of a flood of support, it opened the floodgates for others. Former passengers came forward in the comments, sharing their own negative experiences with the nasty blonde flight attendant on the London route. Former co-workers now feeling safe under the new Aura-Wing leadership shared stories of her bullying and condescending behavior. The GoFundMe was reported for fraud and taken down. She became a pariah online, the very meme her lawyer had warned her about. The final blow came 6 months after the flight. Facing foreclosure, she was forced to sell her condo at a loss. Packing her life into cardboard boxes, she found an old photo album. In it was a picture of her 20 years younger, beaming with pride on her first day of training for Aura-Wing. Her eyes were bright, full of hope and excitement for a life of travel and glamour. Looking at the photo, a single devastating thought pierced through her layers of rage and denial. How did I become so cruel? When did I lose that person? The karma wasn't just the loss of her job or her home. It was the forced, agonizing confrontation with the person she had allowed herself to become. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had built a career on a foundation of small cruelties, and the woman in seat 2A hadn't destroyed her life, she had simply held up a mirror. And Candace Miller could no longer stand the reflection. Her landing was long, hard, and stripped her of everything but the bitter knowledge that she and she alone had been her own saboteur. 1 year later, the sky was not merely a medium of transit for Aura-Wing Airlines. It was a canvas for its rebirth. The changes implemented by Dr. Imani Hayes were not just policy memos, circulated and forgotten. They were a new, vibrant lifeblood pulsing through the veins of the company. The once tarnished silver wings emblazoned on the tails of the fleet now gleamed with renewed purpose, reflecting a company that had soared from the brink of public relations disaster and financial ruin to become the darling of the aviation world. The stock price, a cold and impartial judge, had climbed a staggering 42%. Customer satisfaction metrics, once a source of corporate shame, were now benchmarked as the industry gold standard. Aurawing was no longer just an airline. It was a testament to the radical idea that corporate success and human dignity were not mutually exclusive, but intrinsically linked. Dr. Hayes was on another flight this time, the grueling 17-hour ultra-long haul from New York to Singapore. She was as was her preference in seat 2A. The cabin, however, bore little resemblance to the one she had endured a year prior. It was the newly unveiled Aurasphere Suite, a project she had personally overseen. The old stuffy first-class seats had been ripped out and replaced with individual pods of privacy and understated luxury. The walls were lined with a sound-dampening textile woven with silver thread. The lighting was circadian rhythm-based, shifting imperceptibly in color and intensity to combat jet lag. The leather was supple, the recycled wood grain trim was polished to a soft glow, and the personal monitor was a stunning 32-inch 4K screen. Every detail was a quiet statement of innovation and passenger-centric design. But the most profound change was not in the hardware. It was in the human software. The purser for the flight, a woman named Margaret Atwood, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, elegantly pinned, approached Imani's suite shortly after takeoff. Margaret had been with Aurawing for 25 years. She was a contemporary of Candace Miller, a product of the same generation and the same old-school training. Imani, who made it a point to review the crew manifests of any flight she took, knew this. She watched Margaret with keen interest. "Dr. Hayes," Margaret began, her voice a warm, professional hum. "A sincere welcome on board. My name is Margaret, and I'm the in-flight service manager for this journey. Please let me know if there is anything at all I can do to make your flight more comfortable." There was no fawning, no nervousness, just a calm, assured respect. "Thank you, Margaret. It's a pleasure to be with you and your crew today," Imani replied. "The pleasure is all ours. We're incredibly proud of this new Singapore route and this beautiful aircraft," Margaret said. She then leaned in slightly, her voice softening. "On a more personal note, I wanted to say thank you for giving us our pride back." Imani was taken aback by her candor. "I'm glad to hear you feel that way. It was a team effort." Margaret shook her head slightly. "You provided the vision. The rest of us, well, some of us were just waiting for a leader to follow. The old culture." She paused, choosing her words carefully. It was toxic. It rewarded cynicism. We were taught that seniority was a weapon and that passengers were an inconvenience. Many of us hated it, but we felt powerless to change it. She looked directly at Imani, her gaze unwavering. "I knew Candace. We came up through the ranks together. What happened was a tragedy, but it was a necessary one. It was the shock to the system we needed to wake up. This raw honesty was a product of the new culture. Under the old regime, such a conversation would have been unthinkable. But Imani had instituted an open-door, no-reprisal policy that started with her. She wanted the unvarnished truth. "Change is never easy, Margaret," Imani said gently. "Thank you for helping to lead it on the front lines." As Margaret moved on to greet other passengers, Imani settled back, the purser's words echoing in her mind. A necessary tragedy. She had received a discreet HR update 6 months ago. Candace Miller, after losing her condo, had moved back in with her aging parents in a small town in Ohio. The report said she was working as a receptionist at a local dental clinic. There was a quiet finality to it that brought Imani no joy. Her goal had never been to ruin a single life, but to save a sprawling corporate body of 30,000 employees. Candace hadn't been the disease, but its most virulent symptom. To save the patient, the symptom had to be excised swiftly and decisively. It was a cold, hard calculus of leadership, and it sometimes kept her awake at night. Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet commotion from the suite across the aisle. A young man, probably in his early 20s, was visibly distressed. He was pale, sweating, and gripping the armrests of his seat so tightly his knuckles were white. He was speaking in hushed, panicked tones to a younger flight attendant. Imani recognized the attendant from the manifest Samuel Vance. He was 24 and had joined Aura Wing 8 months ago, part of the first wave of new hires trained entirely under the Hayes Initiative. Imani watched not as the owner, but as a student of her own creation. This was the real test. Samuel was kneeling so that he was at eye level with the passenger. His voice was calm and reassuring. "It's all right, sir. My name is Samuel. You're having a panic attack, and that's perfectly okay. It's very common, and we are going to get through this together. Can you tell me your name?" "Jake," the young man stammered. "I hate flying. I thought being in here," he gestured at the luxurious suite, "would make it better, but it's worse. I feel trapped." Samuel didn't dismiss his fear. He validated it. "I understand completely. The feeling of not being in control can be overwhelming. Let's try something. I want you to look at me. Let's breathe together. A deep breath in for 4 seconds. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold it, and breathe out for 6 seconds. Slow and steady. Let's do it again." He guided Jake through several cycles of box breathing. Margaret, noticing the situation, glided over, not to take charge, but to support her junior. She brought a glass of cool water and a cold towel, placing them silently on the console. She caught Samuel's eye and gave him a subtle, encouraging nod before retreating, allowing him to maintain the connection he'd built with the passenger. "That's better," Samuel said after a minute. "The worst part is passing. Now what can we do to help you feel more in control? Our in-flight entertainment system has a whole section of guided meditations and calming soundscapes. I can get you a pair of noise-cancelling headphones. Or if you'd prefer, I can just sit here with you for a little while and tell you about my ridiculously boring golden retriever. His name is Gus, and his greatest ambition is to catch his own tail." A weak smile touched Jake's lips. "Gus? Gus," Samuel confirmed with a grin. "He's a menace to the local squirrel population, but terrible at his job. It's a whole saga." Imani felt a swell of profound satisfaction. This was it. This was the Hayes Initiative in action. It wasn't a script. It was genuine human connection. Samuel hadn't followed a checklist. He had shown empathy, provided practical tools, and used gentle humor to de-escalate a stressful situation. Margaret had empowered her junior colleague, providing support without undermining his authority. This was the symphony she had envisioned, a culture of care playing out at 39,000 feet. Later in the flight, after Jake was calmly watching a movie, Samuel came to Imani's suite to offer a pre-landing refreshment. "Samuel," Imani began, her voice filled with warmth, "I was very impressed with how you handled that situation with the passenger in 3B. Samuel blushed slightly. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes. We're taught to connect, not just to serve. Your training modules were very clear on that. The see the person, not the passenger principle. It's one thing to write a principle in a manual. It's another to embody it so perfectly. You have a real gift for this," she said. He grew more serious for a moment. "It's personal for me, Mom. My mother, Maria Vance, was a gate agent for Aura Wing for 30 years. She worked at the JFK terminal." Imani's memory, honed by years of data analysis, instantly retrieved a file. Maria Vance, retired 2 years ago. A spotless record, but with several notations from her later years, citing stress-related health issues. She loved the airline. Samuel continued, his voice thick with emotion. But in her last decade, it broke her spirit. The pressure was always on numbers. Boarding times, baggage fees, upsells. The company stopped caring about people, so the employees stopped caring too. She used to come home crying. She said she felt like a cog in a machine that hated people. She passed away just before you took over. He took a steadying breath. I joined because of her. I wanted to be part of bringing the honor back to the wings she wore with pride for so long. When I did my training, and I saw the name of the initiative, the Hayes Initiative, and I went through the modules, all I could think was, Mum would have loved this. So when I help a passenger like Jake, I'm not just doing my job, I'm honoring her. You didn't just rebuild an airline, Dr. Hayes. For a lot of us, you restored a family legacy. So thank you. A lump formed in Imani's throat. Of all the financial reports, all the glowing press, this one story from this one young man was the truest measure of her success. Samuel. She said, her voice softer than he'd heard it. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you. We are incredibly proud of you. As the flight began its final descent into Singapore, the first rays of dawn sliced across the horizon, painting the stratosphere in breathtaking shades of violet, orange, and gold. Imani gazed out the window, the spectacle of light reflecting in her thoughtful eyes. She thought of her own journey, the daughter of immigrants told in 1,000 subtle and overt ways that she didn't belong, the engineer in a world of finance, the woman in a world of men, the black woman in a world that still saw in shades of black and white. Every sneer, every dismissal, every "I'm having trouble with your cadence" had been a stone. Others might have let those stones build a wall of resentment around them. Imani had collected them patiently and used them to build a foundation. Vector thrust dynamics had been the first structure on that foundation, a monument to her intellect. But Aura Wing Airlines was becoming something more. It was a cathedral dedicated to the idea that efficiency and empathy could fly side by side. Her true victory was not financial, nor was it the ego-driven satisfaction of proving her detractors wrong. It was in the quiet confidence of Margaret. It was in the compassionate competence of Samuel. It was in the relieved smile of a nervous passenger named Jake. It was in the restored legacy of a gate agent named Maria Vance. She hadn't just bought an airline. She had infused it with the core lesson her father had taught her all those years ago, that your story, your history, your very voice is a source of strength. She had taken an airline that was losing its story and had given it a new one, a better one. The wheels touched down smoothly on the runway at Changi Airport. A new day had begun. For Aura Wing Airlines, and for its visionary leader, the horizon was clear and it stretched on vast and full of promise. The journey was far from over. Dr. Imani Hayes' story is a powerful reminder that the person you look down on today could be the one signing your paycheck tomorrow. It's a testament to the fact that true power isn't about loud confrontations, but about quiet strength, strategic thinking, and the unwavering belief in one's own worth. Candace Miller's downfall wasn't the result of one mistake, but the culmination of 1,000 small cruelties. This story shows us that karma can be more than just a reversal of fortune. It can be a mirror that forces us to see who we've truly become. It teaches us that respect is the ultimate currency, and the cost of prejudice is a debt that will always eventually come due. If this story of resilience, justice, and profound transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button to show your support. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message of empowerment. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of triumph and consequence. What did you think of Candace's fate? Was it justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.